Hey YouTube, Twig here, bringing you all an update to my Salamangreat Yugioh deck profile for the February 2022 ban list. I was determined to make a Salamangreat deck profile update depending on whatever we got off of the ban list when it was finally released, whether it would have been Salamangreat Gazelle, Mirage Stalio, numbers changing, Circle, you name it, I was going to update the deck. And with Circle at 2, with the latest release of the list, I was happy to do an update. The card definitely adds more potential for search power. They did kind of take away some of the other search power because I did run a couple copies of Pot of Desires in my build, so it evens out. I would say we still have a search for a good number of the Salamangreat monsters thanks to Circle, so very useful there for sure. So happy to do the deck update. So let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. So for the Salamangreat main deck monsters, I'm running 3 Salamangreat Foxy. This is your searcher in the deck. You're able to excavate the top 3 cards of your deck when it's normal summon and add 1 excavated Salamangreat card. Also, you shuffle the rest into the deck, and being able to special summon it from the graveyard by destroying a face-up spell or trap on the field and discarding 1 Salamangreat card just gives you options for destroying your opponent's field spells. I'd say it's definitely a 3 of just for the search power for a good majority of all of our different Salamangreat cards, whether they be the monsters or even the spells in the deck. I also run 3 Salamangreat Spinny, with Mirage Stalio being our main go-to rank 3 monster. 3 Spinny, I would say, is definitely needed. It gets banished if you were to special summon it from the graveyard off of its own monster effect, but thanks to overlaying with it with other cards like Foxy, you can avoid that banish and just set it up back in the graveyard again for you to reuse. And being a discard from the hand for just powering up a monster on the field while you control a Salamangreat card sets it up in the graveyard that much more easily for you to special summon back onto the field. For some of the lower numbers for the Salamangreat monsters, I also run 2 Salamangreat Jaguar. It's a special summon, but also a recycle card for our many different Salamangreat monsters in the graveyard. You can recycle back your additional Sunlight Wolves if you have no more extra copies in the extra deck, or even your Mirage Stalio once you send it to the graveyard for a link summon, so you can then bounce a card on your opponent's field. This card's great for the setup and send because you can also special summon it with Will of the Salamangreat from your hand, and then once it's set up in the graveyard, you can then special summon it back in the field as just an additional monster, and also helping to activate your Sunlight Wolf when a monster is special summoned to one of its arrows to recycle your other fire monsters in the graveyard. For some of the one-ofs for the Salamangreat monsters, I run 1 Salamangreat Gazelle and 1 Falco. I was betting on Gazelle coming off the list, but I'm still very much happy that Circle is at 2. It just gives us another search option for Gazelle, but with Falco being the card that recycles our Salamangreat spell or traps when it's sent to the graveyard, being able to just recycle our Roars, Circles, or Rage, you name it, you have options with this card, and Gazelle being able to set up our graveyard plays by sending other Salamangreat cards when it's normal or special summoned, and also being able to special summon it if a Salamangreat monster is sent to the graveyard. So if you reincarnation link summon or just use one of your Salamangreat monsters for the link summon on the resolution, you can special summon Gazelle onto the field and have the additional send ready to go. For the other non-Salamangreat monsters I run the deck, I still run the 3 Flame Buffalo. You do need to discard a Cyberse monster to benefit from this card, but if it's face up and leaves the field, you discard 1 Cyberse monster, and if you do, draw 2 cards. What's great about this card is I use it with the Chainlink 1 for Battle Links to then summon Battle Links with this card, and then I go Chainlink 1 Buffalo, Chainlink 2 Battle Links, so then they have to respond with their activation of a card to the Chainlink 2 Battle Links, so then I'll either not get my search for the field spell, but I'll still get my discard draw 2 off of the Buffalo. And you want to do it that way so you can search the field spell and not draw it off of Buffalo. For the hand traps, I do run a good number of hand traps in the deck just because they help for being able to recycle Ash Blossom with Sunlight Wolf. If you have your opponent go first and you send Ash Blossom, it's set up in the graveyard. You can then add it back to your hand with Sunlight Wolf. You can't use it the turn you add it back, but you're able to have it to go ready against your opponent on the following turn. I also run the 2 Effect Veiler, just more monster stopping power against my opponent, especially if they go first. And lastly, the 2 Nibiru. This is just because you can definitely recover with this deck if you tribute out your own monsters, because you have cards like Will of the Salamangreat to summon back just 1 monster resource back onto the field. It's more just to take away that resource from your opponent. It's why I like running 2 Nibiru in the deck as that option. And that is it for the monsters. We'll now move on to the spells back at 2 from the latest ban list, Salamangreat Circle. Very, very happy to have this card back. With this card, you activate one of these effects. You add one Salamangreat monster from your deck to your hand, or target one Salamangreat Link monster you control that was link summoned using a monster with the same name. It's unaffected by monster effects this turn, except its own. You can activate one circle per turn. So the main, effect you'll use for Circle is the search power. You can add it during the standby phase to make sure your opponent doesn't activate anything in response that they would have normally from the main phase activation. It can be added back to your hand with cards like your Sunlight Wolf. It can be set back on the field with cards like Falco. Having 2 just gives us that better option to search out the needed Salamangreat card. If we already have Gazelle, we'll search out Foxy. If we already have Foxy, we'll search out Gazelle. You have all the options available to you at that much greater consistency thanks to this card being at 2. I also run 2 Will the Salamangreat. You can send also your spells with Gazelle and then search them back out with the Sunlight Wolf play, so setting up in the graveyard is that much more quickly and usable. I run 2 Will the Salamangreat. I'm not too afraid of the low numbers because I also had to reduce my Pot of Desires numbers in the deck, so less chance of me banishing multiple copies of some of the cards in the deck. With the 1-up for the Salamangreat spells being the 1 Sanctuary, it's all you need. You'll search it off of the Banlist and then be ready to go from there. And with it, it's just the card you use for your Reincarnation Link Summon, being able to summon out a Link monster using the same monster from your field to use it for the summon. For some of the other spells around the deck, I do run 3 Signet Mining. I really love using this card in the deck because if you send one of your Salamangreat monsters and search out Gazelle on resolution, you can special summon Gazelle onto the field and have the additional search without even taking up your normal summon. So if you have the Fox in your hand additionally, you'll have that search. And most of the time, my opponent will stop the Gazelle send by using Ash Blossom on that, and then I'm free to use Foxy on the normal summon. For some of the other spells, I also run 2 Triple Tactics Talent. I know it's more of a pricey card in the deck. If you don't have Triple Tactics Talent, you can always replace these 2 cards with 1 Monster Reborn and 1 Upstart Goblin. It's just a card that you're in a deck that your opponent's definitely going to use monster effects to stop. So being able to either gain a draw 2 or take one of your opponent's resources or take away one of their own resources from their hand, it's why I like running it in the main deck to, combat my opponent's plays. And then for the 1-ofs, I run 1 Call by the Grave, same premise, just stopping my opponent's hand traps so I can resolve my own Salamangreat cards, and 1 Pot of Desires. This card is at 1 on the list. There's just no restrictions with this card. The risk of banishing, obviously, with it, but I still like running 1 because that draw power when you top deck this card definitely will come in handy, and most of the time, I'll have most of the cards searched out of the deck that I need for a lot of my plays, so using Pot of Desires will only come up if I need that 1 additional draw 2. And that is it for the spells. Moving on to the traps, I run 1 Salamangreat Roar and 1 Salamangreat Rage. The destruction power with Rage and the negation with Roar. You can both set these cards up quite easily with Gazelle and then the Sunlight Wolf play for recycle onto the field, or Falco, you name it. Having these cards set and reusable makes it all the better because then you have the destruction with Rage and your reincarnated monsters being able to pop as many as the Link monster you control, and Roar being able to stop those cards your opponent may try to use against you with the protection of your own Salamangreats being protected by battle links. And then for the other traps, I run 3 Solemn Strike, just setting up that back row with your Salamangreat Link monster. Whether you have Strike and 1 Roar set, that could be a good amount to stop a lot your opponent may try to do. And if they go first, I run the 3 Infinite Impermanence from the Cyber Strike structure deck. It's just an easy card to get access to. If you have them, definitely usable. If not, you can always try more of the Solemn Brigade like Solemn Judgment and Solemn Warning to replace the fact if you don't have Infinite Impermanence. And that is it for the main deck. Moving on now to the extra deck. For the Salamangreat monsters, I run 3 Salamangreat Battle Links. It's your go-to Link 1 monster being able to search out the field spell, but also in the graveyard being able to protect your other Salamangreat cards on the field if they would be destroyed. This includes your spells on the field, so your field spell or your Will of the Salamangreat. Very, very useful there, but it's also just a card that you can set up a lot more different plays using Jack Jaguar as that 1 Link arrow to go into. Just having 1 Jack Jaguar at least gives you a Sunlight Wolf on the field, because then as long as you have that other Salamangreat monster in the graveyard to recycle back and special summon out. Sunlight Wolf, I've talked about this card enough in the video. It helps with recycle power, being able to add back your Salamangreat's power traps, and also being able to just have that power to recycle your own hand traps, including Ash Blossom or any of the other needed Salamangreat cards. If you've already used Gazelle in that turn, you can at least then add it back to your hand, a much safer place for it to be than your graveyard, thanks to Sunlight Wolf, and use it again next turn, or even on your opponent's turn if Sunlight Wolf were to go to the graveyard. and also 2 Salamangreat Yugioh for the attack reduction power against your opponent, but also just a Link 3 to utilize your many different Salamangreat monsters, and then having 1 additional monster with this card to then go into Access Code Talker, which can then target the Yugioh in the graveyard, having a 5,300 attack point Access Code Talker. For the other Cyber Slink monsters, I run 1 Transcode Talker, 1 Access Code Talker, both great for the setup, along with Update Jammer for Transcode Talker, but Access Code Talker for the destruction plays against your opponent and the power hit plays. And lastly, for the Link monsters, 1 Nightmare Phoenix. The fact that it is a fire monster goes very, very well for your Mirage Stalio, which limits you out of other monster effects except for fire monsters, so you at least have Phoenix to go into still. And for the Xyz monsters, I run 1 Mirage Stalio, still at 1 on the ban list, but recyclable thanks to cards like Jack Jaguar from your graveyard. After you send it for a Link play, you can bounce a card in your opponent's field, and the detach 1 for a special summon of a monster. And then for the rest of the Xyz monsters, 1 Abyss Dweller and 1 Baguska defense against your opponent, depending on what you wanted to use, whether it be for graveyard shutdown with Abyss Dweller or the field shutdown with Baguska playing defensively with this card. I thought of using Zeus as additional cards to overlay with Mirage Stalio, but since you can't activate fire effects, except effects for fire, during the turn you use Mirage Stalio, I just like using these rank 4s better. They work well with the setup with Falco and Jack Jaguar if the situation pops up, to then use against your opponent. As for some of the go-to plays in the deck, the main new option is just more searchability thanks to Salamangreat Circle, but being able to search out your plays and some of your main go-to ones will still be relying on Foxy for the normal summon, depending on what you search out. And like I said, running 1 additional copy of Circle and 1 less of Desire gives us an additional chance to search out a playable card thanks to Salamangreat Foxy, because if you reveal Desire off of Foxy, you're not able to add that card to your hand. But adding Circle gives you a Gazelle, adding the Gazelle to your hand then gives you the option to link 1 with Foxy into your Battle Link, summoning out the Gazelle, which you can then use to either send the spell or trap if you already have the Spinny in your hand, or send the Spinny to the graveyard, special summoning it, giving you the overlay option of your Mirage Stalio, and then setting up the Jaguar play, which I would say is one of the most well-known Salamangreat plays, added on to the fact that Salamangreat Circle just makes it that much more easier of a play to do. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Salamangreats are one of my favorites. I've liked the deck ever since they came out in Soul Fusion, and hopefully we'll get some more support. Who knows, by the time this video comes out, maybe we would have gotten the announcement for the rank 4 that we're still waiting to get in the TCG in the Battle of Chaos set. I wait to see the full list for the TCG, but until then, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and Kira Twig out.